Welcome back to another episode of Reef, Ramble. I'm Manny Katz, and today we're chatting with Dr. Alex Schnell. Dr. Schnell is a comparative animal psychologist and world-leading cephalopod cognition researcher. Her work explores the minds of some of the world's most fascinating creatures, cuttlefish, octopus, as well as other non-aquatic Animalia. She's also a National Geographic Explorer, as well as a filmmaker who's lent her hand on a variety of critically acclaimed films like Blue Planet 2, Planet Earth 3, and Secrets of the Octopus. Today we chatted remotely from the comfort of her home offices. And with that being said, let's get into it. Alrighty, Alex, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Manny.
Yeah, so I guess I just want to start off for people who may not know who you are or what you do, if you'd like to just introduce yourself, and can you tell us what it is that you do?
Sure. I am Dr. Alex Schnell. I trained as a marine biologist and then later specialized as a comparative animal psychologist. And comparative psychologists really study how different animals think, feel, and behave. And so essentially it's really comparing minds across species to understand how intelligence evolved.
That sounds like a lot. How does one become a comparative animal psychologist? What path did you take to get there?
I guess there's no single path. For me, it really started with a curiosity of how animals perceive their world. And so when I was studying, when I was, looking around in rock pools, growing up, I lived by the beach. And so I was really lucky to have that experience. And I would have incredible interactions with marine life. And then I just started thinking about how they might be perceiving me. And so that's when I started focusing. I decided I wanted to focus on behavior when I went into graduate research.
Super cool. And whereabouts exactly are you from?
I grew up in Sydney. So I spent most of my life in the eastern suburbs, so along Bondi Beach, Tamarama, Clovelly, and Coogee.
Super cool. So I guess as a comparative animal psychologist, what does your day-to-day look like? What is your job? How about do you go about your work?
I think everyone thinks that I spend all my time either in the water or just playing with animals. Unfortunately, it's not. My days are very varied. So some days I'll be running experiments and I'll be testing, decision making and problem solving in particular animals. And those specific times can run for about 2 to 3 months, depending on the experiment that I'm doing. But then all the other time, and the majority of the time, I'm writing, I'm consulting, I'm looking at data. And so a lot of it can be desk-based. But I do like that it's varied because it's cyclic. So sometimes when I've just had absolutely enough of data analysis, I'm like, oh, now I can write the paper. And then when I've had enough of writing, then I start thinking about my next project.
Very nice. And I guess what are you researching currently at the moment? What are you working on?
At the moment, I am not leading anything. I'm more of a collaborator with a National Geographic project that I'll be going on fieldwork with next week, no, the week after, looking at day octopuses and how they collaborate with the coral trout. So that's been led by a colleague and friend of mine, and I'm tagging along, which I'm very excited about. And then I have been putting together some proposals to look at tool use in the coconut octopus. So hopefully that gets funded. And I am actually leading one small project, but it's more of an education project with my fabulous collaborator over in the States. And we're looking at putting together an educational toolkit to help young students with human-wildlife conflict, or overcome it.
Well, that sounds like a whole lot of that sounds like a lot that you've got going on. I guess with your work, can you explain a bit how, I guess, who you work for, or how that how you end up getting to do all these different things? Do you work at a university? Do you work for like a not-for-profit? How does it go?
For many years, I was working with universities. I was jumping around as a postdoctoral researcher. So I lived in France, in the States, in the UK, was my last stint at the University of Cambridge. And I'm still affiliated with my old lab at the University of Cambridge as I guess you'd call me a visiting scholar. So I still
Mm.
collaborate with them. But I have moved out of strictly academic work. And that was mainly because I just didn't see myself as starting my own lab. Um, I think there were a couple of times that I came very close and it just didn't feel like the right decision. So for many years after Cambridge, I was freelancing. So I was working for different organizations, working as a consultant, whether that was writing reports for understanding octopus intelligence for welfare reasons. Uh, Others, I was working in film as well, so making natural history film, and everything was freelancing until this year, actually. And I started working for a non-profit organization, so the World Animal Protection, and I am now working for them as a research manager. So I do that 4 days a week. I absolutely love the work. It's very much focused on, like the projects I'm focused on now are wildlife trade. And so how we can try and minimize the harm that's happening out in the wildlife trade. So all the animals that are
Mhm.
traded as commodities. And then my projects with National Geographic are side projects that I do. And so they're very much, yeah, I mean, I have to go out and seek the funding and then
Yeah.
try and carve out time in my ridiculous schedule to go and do that. But
Yeah.
that's why, yeah, collaboration is really important for me, because currently the project that I'm proposing to do would take place in Indonesia, and there has to be quite a bit of field work, and I can't be away from my kids for the proposed amount of time. So the
Fair enough.
collaboration is yeah, very important, so that I can go check in everything's going, check to make sure everything's going well, and then come back and
Mm.
maybe return again.
Yeah, it's crazy to me that your like little side gigs are casually working on Nat Geo projects and flying around the world and getting to see and do pretty amazing stuff. That's just little bit of a flex.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I think at the moment, a lot of the projects that I'm working on as a side project are legacy projects from my freelance work. So
mm,
that, I'm finishing up, or some of them were greenlit, and I was like, oh, okay, now I'm going to have to work with them alongside my day job.
yeah.
Um, but it is definitely, I think, as someone who is overly ambitious, I have to try and learn to be more discerning about what
Mhm.
I say yes to, and just striking the balance now, because I'm no longer a full-time freelancer.
Yeah, fair. And I guess in your freelancing days, you've worked on a variety of films for Nat Geo and the BBC and Netflix and Disney Plus and all that, in a bunch of different roles. You've worked as a specialist researcher and a producer and lead storyteller. What's been your favorite project that you've been able to work on?
Oh, that's a tough one. But yeah, I think initially when I went from doing research in natural history films behind the camera and then
Mm.
transitioned to being in front of the camera as a host, it was a very exponential learning curve. Like it was really hard because I'd never been on camera before. I didn't get any formal training. Um, but once the learning took place, I really enjoyed it. So I think because of that, Secrets of the Octopus is probably particularly special. It allowed me to bring, or I guess it allowed me to develop narrative skills, so my storytelling skills and science, in a way that was able to reach a global audience. And I just found that the feedback was incredible as well. So I had all this incredible feedback from people that I knew, and also people that I didn't know, that contacted me on my website
Mm.
about how the series had changed their perspective on octopus. And that's essentially the overarching theme of all the work that I do, so that people, I studied these alien minds, if you will, so that people can shift their perspective and realize, oh, we have similarities here, even though this animal looks completely different. It kind of lifts that barrier of otherness, and people can start to connect with a character that looks so different from them. And rather than feeling no emotion or maybe negative emotions towards that animal before, they now are filled with positive emotions. And with that comes behavior change. Like some people say they don't no longer eat octopus, or they just have so much more appreciation for this animal without a backbone. And so getting that feedback, I think, from Secrets of the Octopus was really fulfilling.
As far as, I guess, the animals that you work with or work on, cephalopods are a pretty big focus in your life. You've got many papers on cuttlefish and octopus. Aside from, I guess, marine species, what other animals do you like working with?
Um, I think cuttlefish are always going to have my heart. I do love them. And yeah, even probably more so than octopus. And that's because octopus can be a little bit temperamental. So all animals have distinct personality types. You have your shy ones and your more bold ones. But the octopus, I feel like, have temperamental days where sometimes they'll want to be interactive with you, and then other days they want nothing to do with you. And so it makes it really hard to get any consistent data from them. So when it comes to marine critters, cuttlefish were always my preferred subjects. But I've also loved working with corvids. So while I was over at the University of Cambridge, they have a corvid lab there. And so
Now, for those who don't know, because I'm certainly not familiar with corvids, what is a corvid?
corvids, crows, ravens, and jays. And they're large brain birds, essentially. And a lot of corvids are food caching birds. So they store food. And so we had a whole bunch of Eurasian jays at the University of Cambridge, and I did some self-control experiments with them and some violation of expectation experiments with them. And it was really lovely to get to work with another animal group and, get to find out their idiosyncrasies. Some of them would always want to interact with you, others wouldn't. But yeah, that was really nice. And then I've done some other very short projects, small projects, more in a supportive role rather than leading it. So I've worked to support a researcher that was looking at elephant communication. And then I was also working in a supportive role to look at crocodile and alligator behavior. So yeah, I've worked on a few different animals.
That's pretty sweet. As far as working, I guess, in this storytelling capacity, working as a researcher or producer, or just the storyteller for films in general, what role do you prefer having behind for a production?
Like which one I prefer, storytelling or science?
Yeah, do you prefer, like you've mentioned that you don't necessarily, it took you some time to get to be in front of the camera, but like you said before, where when you can communicate the science effectively, you can see change in people's lives. But do you enjoy being able to do that firsthand and do that, or be more in the back end side of things?
I think I enjoy both. I think that I love the science. I love thinking about experiments and how I would test certain questions that I have about an animal mind, and brainstorming, and then writing up a compelling proposal and hopefully getting the funding, which is a very competitive process. But then on the back end of that, of collecting the data, getting the data you'd hoped for, seeing, the patterns that you potentially hypothesize. Sometimes it's different patterns, and that's okay. That's what science is. You know, Science, I guess, often doesn't go the way that you want it to, but it's never boring. So hopefully you get some data and you're able to tell a story, but then also seeing the importance of them being able to communicate that. I think being in the film industry has really opened up a doorway for me, realizing that if you publish a paper, a peer-reviewed paper, you might get several hundred people reading it, and it's a very it's an echo chamber. It's, you know, academics reading academic work, but being able to translate that into a narrative or an engaging story so that the wider public can understand the science
Mm.
is so important. Because if you're not going to do it, or you're not working with journalists that are helping you to do that, sometimes the science is interpreted incorrectly, or it's just buried, and then all this beautiful science that, you know, academics have been working on doesn't get translated into the wider public.
Yeah. In regards to research, are there any questions that you would like to have answered? Is there any particular research topics that you'd like to investigate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the funding I'm applying for now, I'm really interested in looking at how sophisticated the tool use behavior is of the coconut octopus. There
Mhm.
was a paper published back in 2009, and um, kind of documenting this behavior, but no one has studied, you know, more like looked at it formally in any other way to see whether the octopuses have strategic decision making when they choose their objects for tool use, if they have different object preference, or if planning's involved. And so I would love to have a look at that with a closer lens. And then another thing that I'd be really interested to look at in cephalopods is whether they can experience positive emotions. So we know through growing evidence that they have the capacity to experience negative ones. And like a lot of this research in the animal world, I mean, 90% of the research looks at negative emotions, but I'd be really interested in looking at whether they can experience positive ones like curiosity and joy. And um, so, yeah, they're kind of the goals that I have for the future that I'd love to be able to explore.
Nice. I guess, something that I'm really, I guess, interested in hearing about as well is, you've mentioned that as when you were younger and just spending times in rock pools and observing different animal behaviors. Can you tell me a bit about your time, I guess, working as a dive master and working in, I guess, the tourism industry and how that has influenced your career?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was hugely influential. So after I finished my undergrad, I did what we call an honors here. I don't think anywhere else but Australia does an honors. It's like a mini masters that takes place over a 9-month period. And then I booked a trip to Central America with my best friend, and we were like, let's go. We both knew how to dive, but we wanted to be dive masters. And so we went to Roatan it's an island, one of the Bay Islands of Honduras. And we did a 3-month dive internship. And it was just I mean, after that, we traveled through Central and South America, but it was one of the funnest 3 months of my life. The conditions in Roatan were just always stunning, 30 meters visibility. It was uh, full of different animals. And I think getting to dive 2 times a day and just spending so much intimate time with the animals really ignited more questions for me. So after I traveled through Central America, I ended up living in Mexico for about 2 years and then working as a dive master there. And that's when I decided I wanted to go back home and go to grad school, because I just had so many questions about the behaviors that I was seeing, in the water every day.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I guess it's funny because as somebody who works in the tourism industry and who gets to interact with lots of people in the dive industry, um, it's funny to me how many people sort of that I see in academia who had a previous experience working as a dive master or as a dive instructor. It just seems like such a natural sort of pathway to get into this field that you're in.
I think, yeah, that's a really important point. So, especially anyone studying behavior or
Mm.
animals, having that wild experience is often what triggers the peak in your interest. And you're seeing this behavior in front of you, and you're like, I wonder how that works. Or I wonder what's going on here. And so seeing a wild behavior is kind of the first step into them thinking about that and thinking about how you might be able to test that, whether in the wild or back in the lab.
Yep. So for anybody listening who is interested in getting into marine science, do you have any bits of advice or words of wisdom?
I started really broad. So my undergrad at the University of Sydney was a Bachelor of Marine Science. And so I took, I mean, the first year you have to start broad. You do all your basic science subjects and all your math subjects. But then even in the second year, I started really broad because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Like I knew behavior was something that was really interesting to me, but also wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing something. So I took coastal management courses. I took geology and what we can learn from coral reefs. Coastal ecology. And then obviously my behavior courses. And it just reaffirms that I wanted to do behavior. And then also get involved in different little projects, because whether they're within community, within the university, it can give you a really hands-on experience, and you might realize, oh, yeah, this is cool, but I'm not really into it. Like I remember after my undergraduate, I was so grateful to my honours supervisor who gave me a job as his research assistant, but he mainly looked at physiology. And so we're looking at tissue samples and metabolism. And I think after working in a lab for a whole year on just tissue samples, I just realized, no, that's not for me.
It's just not
I don't
it.
love science that much. There's some people that could do any type of science, and I was like, no. So I think those lessons are really important, and the only way you're going to learn them is by getting out there and trying it out.
Yeah. Amazing. Alex, is there anything else that you would like to plug, tell people about, that you're any upcoming projects that you're on that you can speak about, that you're allowed to talk about?
I just think that, I mean, I guess a lot of people since watching Secrets of the Octopus were wanting to know how they could have an interaction with them. And one thing that I've been seeing trending, I guess, on social media, which is a little bit worrying, is people picking up the animals for a selfie. And I would strongly advise against that. I think that we all want to have special moments with a wild animal, but it has to be on their terms. Like I said before, there's strong evidence to suggest that cephalopods can experience negative emotions. So if you're picking up an octopus or a cuttlefish, they're going to be experiencing panic, distress, fear, and that's not the type of interaction you want to have. A lot of them are curious, and if you are patient, and whether you're snorkeling or you're on scuba is a lot easier, and you can sit there with an individual for a while. I've had many interactions where they're the ones that reach out and give you a gentle handshake. And so that's the sort of interaction that you should strive for, not ones where you're handling an animal.
Not like forcing yourself onto the animal. Make sure there's consent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough. Alex, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on. And best of luck with everything in the future.
Thanks so much. It's been great to be on.
Cheers. And that's it for today. If you enjoyed today's episode, feel free to follow us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Feel free to rate the show as well. You can find us on all the usual social platforms at Airlab. That's EYRELAB. And you can follow Alex on all of her social media things too. She's got lots of films, as discussed in the episode. Make sure to check those out on Nat Geo and on Disney Plus and on Netflix and wherever you could find anything that Alex touches. Pretty much anything she works on is absolute gold, so make sure you check that out, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.